Welcome back to Close Up, where we are continuing our Senate GOP Sunday, a marquee matchup in the primary. Two former U.S. senators, and our next guest is leaning into his new status as no longer quite the establishment favorite in this race. Former U.S. Senator Scott Brown joins us on Close Up. Senator, thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here again. Good to see you.
So what has happened to you in this primary in terms of having Senator Sununu come in and a lot of your former colleagues and the NRSC all move in his direction? I don't think very many people would characterize that as a positive development, and yet you seem more at ease and happier now in this race than I've seen you than in the last 4 months. What's going on?
Well, first of all, I've always been the underdog, and you remember when I stopped the Democrat supermajority when Kennedy died, I had zero help until the last week, and they are always picking winners and losers, and respectfully, not only throughout the country, but in New Hampshire, they haven't done a very good job. I'm not surprised. You know, the Sununu name is obviously a very well-established name, but John is not Chris. And when people are talking, they say, oh, I love Chris. It's true. And they go, who? I go, John. Oh, I didn't know there was a John. Oh, yeah, because they're either new to New Hampshire or they don't remember what he's been doing. And yeah, I like that underdog role. And almost to the second when he announced, I was in Texas fundraising actually, and the groundswell of support from the grassroots and the activists, people are even on the fence with me, they're all on board, and our fundraising has actually ticked up. Yesterday we had a phenomenal day. So I welcome the opportunity to discuss the issues, talk about where we agree and disagree, but people need a fighter. They don't need to have somebody go down there and do the kumbaya thing like he referenced in his opening video. We need someone to fight for New Hampshire because our present delegation certainly hasn't been doing that. They've been throwing in roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and I feel I have a better chance to do that, especially with the support we're getting.
As you note, the Sununu name is powerful in New Hampshire politics. So what is the path to victory in this primary?
Well, first of all, people think it's Chris. It's not Chris. It's John. And John is no Chris, obviously. And he's going to have to go and prove himself, and he's going to have to answer a lot of questions. As we know, he's never voted for President Trump. He and his family have been Trump bashers for over a decade. He voted for Kasich, he voted for somebody else, he did the whole thing, Trump's a loser, and then he said, well, I didn't write the headline. Yeah, but you read the article, it's what he's saying. And he has to answer those questions. I obviously endorsed him in 2016. I voted for him. I was his ambassador for 4 years. I voted for again and again, and I'm on TV, radio, talking about the amazing things he's doing, and he seems kind of like doesn't really even want the support of the president because he can't answer those questions as to why basically he's never supported him. So we'll see. It's fun. Why do we have to all of a sudden, oh, he's out here, it's a Sununu, we have to bend the knee? This isn't a monarchy, but more importantly, don't we deserve a vibrant, imagine that, two former United States senators who live in the same town. I ride my bike by his house and see if he's awake, and usually he's not. I'm kidding. Isn't that amazing? We have that opportunity to actually talk about real issues and what makes us different and who should represent our state.
Obviously it'll be a lot of fun in Rye, and it's a very politically activated town. But what if Sununu gets that Trump endorsement? How do you present yourself as the MAGA candidate if Trump is pro-Sununu?
Well, first of all, that hasn't happened. We're both in talks with the White House. I'm sure he is. If he isn't, he should be, as I have been. And that's going to be up to the president to decide. And if that happens, then obviously we'll figure out where we go from there. But I can tell you what, if he gets the endorsement from the president, the grassroots and the activists will absolutely not be with him, and he will absolutely not win this election, period.
Trump is calling today for the Senate Republicans to abolish the filibuster and end the shutdown unilaterally, wiping the Democrats out. Are you on board with that idea? The filibuster, the nuclear option, is one Republicans have resisted in the past.
Yeah, no, I like the president. I like a lot of what he's doing, but I've always told him that I would give him my opinion on a whole host of things. He can take it or leave it, but no, I believe the filibuster is what separates us from the House. And if we do that now, what if the Democrats are in charge in 28, the presidency, the House, the Senate? They'll eliminate the filibuster for good. They'll stack the Supreme Court, and then they'll take the territories like D.C. and Puerto Rico and make them states, and then they will have more senators, more congressmen, and we will never, ever be in power. And imagine what our world and our country will look like then. So no, I support what we have right now.
Circling back to the primary, you've called on Senator Sununu to be transparent about the work in the private sector that he's done over the last decade and a half, and disclose how much money he's made. Can you really be calling him out on this, though? Because you've had your fair share of Wall Street support in the past as well as a candidate.
Well, I've gotten broad-based support from everybody, but I'm not the guy that did the bank bailouts and then worked for the very same banks that he bailed out and made tens of millions of dollars. I'm happy to disclose my tax returns for the last 10 years, happy to disclose my client list. I encourage him to do it. We shouldn't be hiding anything. I think transparency in everything, whether it's at, what our medical bills are in our healthcare industry, in our colleges and universities, people are running for political office. What's wrong with that? I think it's important to know what he's been doing, because I've been out supporting our House and Senate PACs, individual candidates, holding our barbecues, bringing people together to learn and grow. What has he been doing for New Hampshire? Because I know he was working as an advisor, lobbyist, whatever you want to call it, in D.C. since he lost to Jeanne Shaheen. I've been out there working hard for the people in New Hampshire, doing things, coaching, part of the community. People need to know where we stand and what we believe in. And this is going to be an issue about policies, not polls. Washington, D.C. is not going to determine who's going to run or who's going to win. It's going to be the people of New Hampshire.
Let's talk some policy. And how about immigration? Do you see the current high visibility, militarized version of ICE as a permanent feature now of American law enforcement?
No, I don't. But we have a problem when Biden let in all these people who don't belong here. And, they're following the law. And if you don't like the law, you change the law. I don't see anybody making that effort. But to think we're going to demonize the people that are doing their jobs, trying to get people who are hurting and killing and maiming our citizens here out is completely inappropriate. Assassination attempts, the assault and battery, and you have Chris Pappas, who doesn't even support the qualified immunity. I have family members who are in law enforcement. I care very deeply about who they are and what they're doing, and they're trying to basically put that genie back into the bottle that just exploded under President Biden.
You served in the Army National Guard. We just had General Don Bolduc on the program a few weeks ago, and he said he'd rather resign than deploy domestically in a law enforcement function against the people of the United States. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, Don's an endorser and supporter of mine. I have a lot of respect for him. A guy who at 60 went to the police academy, graduated #1, and now he's a sergeant in the police force. I mean, unbelievable. Listen, they're following the law, and if the people in these states aren't going to keep our cities safe, then what those guardsmen are traditionally doing are backfilling the law enforcement in those particular cities so they can go do their jobs. They're getting no support from their governors and sometimes their own mayors. I mean, look what happened in D.C. The turnaround there is remarkable. And I encourage people to basically tell their governors, and like we have here, we did away with the sanctuary cities. We support our law enforcement. We did bail reform. Other towns and other cities and other states need to do the same thing.
For those legislative fixes, that's how it should work. But do you see, once you start the military path, when do you stop?
Well, that's up to the administration. I believe that there are very serious issues in our cities with crime, rampant crime, people that are here illegally, gang members and others. If the Democratic governors and Republican governors did their jobs, I mean, we had a Republican governor in Tennessee, let them into Memphis, and the Democratic mayor said, thank you, we need this help. Just say, we need your help, and then we can offer other, maybe, support. But they don't want any support, and that's not the answer.
You served overseas as an ambassador, sort of representing America and sort of also somewhat the America First agenda. A lot of people are questioning what the president is doing, sending 20 billion American dollars to Argentina as a bailout there. Are you on board with that? Is that a good idea?
No, I'm not on board on that. Once again, I am not afraid to tell the president I think that's wrong. We need to support our local cattle farmers. My wife's family is from Iowa. They are cattle breeders. This is a very serious issue. I want to make sure that we're getting good American beef, and there should be a disclosure on all packaging where our beef comes from. I think that's part of eating well and knowing what's in our food. The processed food, the highly processed food, those days are over. We have to go more natural, and no, I don't support that.
So it's not America First?
Listen, it's America First to provide for our cattle farmers and for our people to eat good American food. I happen to disagree with the president on that one.
Before we wrap up here, the president's asking for $230 million from the Department of Justice for all of the investigations that happened. Would you like to see a payout of that magnitude, almost $250 million, go to the president?
Yeah, listen, I don't know enough about that. I heard he said something like that. I want to focus on what's going on right now. I want to move us forward. I want to make sure that we can actually actually have a Republican representative 2 out of 32 here in New England, and that we have somebody who's there not thwarting our New Hampshire advantage every single time. And if people want to get involved, they can go to scottbrown.com. They can help. They can join forces like they're doing. And I think a vibrant primary is so important. And those things that's between the president and whomever. I want to save all of our money. My number one issue is our national debt. And if this is contributing to our national debt, then no, I'm not supportive of it. I believe that we need to do that immediately. And all the money we're getting in through tariffs and all these things the president's doing, it should immediately going down to paying down our national debt. I don't want a gift card. I don't want more money. We need to open up the government, and shame on Jean and Maggie. Jean especially, she's got nothing to lose. Take the shackles off Jean and do the right thing, because 75,000 people are here. I would support that additional standalone bill, but they should be in office right now, the House and Senate, 24 hours a day doing the people's business and open up this government.
All right, Senator Scott Brown, thanks for joining us on Close Up. We'll see you out there on the trail.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.